Many thanks to my supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to join them, check the link in the description. But now, enjoy the video. Earlier this year, I was able to attend the 24 Hours of Le Mans for the first time, and I had a blast. Not only was the on-track action incredible, the race witnessing an intense back and forth between Toyota, Porsche, and Ferrari for the overall win, but the whole atmosphere of the event itself was just intoxicating. I could easily see why many consider Le Mans to be the greatest race on Earth. But depending on who you ask, you'll always get a different perspective on that. There are no shortage of classic endurance races, like the Nürburgring 24 Hours, Spa 24, or Daytona 24. Of course, where you're from can also play a factor. Australian motorsport fans, for example, will likely point to the Bathurst 1000 or even Bathurst 12 Hours as their favourites. And this isn't limited to just enduros. In the US, the two biggest races of the year are the Indy 500 and Daytona 500 respectively. Those are of course oval races, a completely different discipline to regular circuit racing, and another would be rally. Rally Finland, also known as the 1000 Lakes, is the jewel in the crown for rally enthusiasts. Of course, Formula 1's jewel in the crown is a bit different, but really, you could pick any of the 24 races on its calendar as your favourites. As someone who's followed Japanese racing for a while, there are a couple of obvious candidates there. Take the Suzuka 1000 kilometers. This race has been run in various guises since it was first held in 1966, from non-championship to the World Sports Car Championship, FIA GT Championship, Super GT, and most recently, the Intercontinental GT Challenge. The latter was run as a 10-hour race in 2018 and 2019, but the event is actually being revived next year with its original 1000 kilometer distance. However, if you were to ask me what I truly think the greatest race on Earth is, I would throw you a curveball. Because nestled in the countryside of North Japan, you can find a circuit that over the years has thrown up some of the most exciting, dramatic, and downright bizarre moments I've ever seen in professional motorsports. Strap yourselves in, because I assure you, this is gonna be a wild ride. But first, a quick history lesson. The Sportsland SUGO circuit was opened in 1975 just outside the city of Sendai in North Japan. It was created by Yamaha as a multi-purpose facility boasting not just the main circuit for cars and bikes, but also a kart track, as well as tennis courts, football pitches, and even more. Its original layout comprised of only 5 real corners that could all be taken with a lot of speed. This gave the track a very fast and flowing nature, but given the relative lack of runoff areas, it was also quite dangerous. Even still, Group C prototypes did race on it for a one-off event in 1985, with Kunimitsu Takahashi setting the outright lap record of 47.11 seconds in a Porsche 962C. The lack of safety was really brought into question when in 1986, 2 touring car drivers were killed in separate accidents. In response, the circuit underwent a major redesign for 1987. The end result was a massively revamped layout that included an all-new infield section. The circuit once again welcomed Group C cars by way of the All Japan Sports Prototype Championship starting in 1990. It also hosted the domestic Formula 3000 Championship, which went on to become Formula Nippon and now Super Formula. It even hosted World Superbikes for a number of years. However, we won't be talking about any of those in this video. After the JSPC dissolved at the end of the 1992 season, a vacuum was created in Japan's sports car racing scene. This void was soon filled by the All Japan GT Championship, better known as the JGTC. SUGO was one of the circuits to appear in its first season in 1994, and has since been an ever-present fixture on the calendar. The only exception in the 30 years since then being the pandemic-affected 2020 season. However, in current day, the circuit is very much an outlier with its narrow, old-school design. One way this is evidenced is in how there are no real service roads that run alongside the track, meaning that if an emergency vehicle is needed to tend to an accident, you'll often see them drive driving on the circuit itself during the race. There's really nothing like SUGO on the current Super GT calendar, but the closest comparison would be Okayama International. It too is a relatively narrow old-school track, but there is one crucial difference. Although it was completely overhauled in 1987, SUGO's long and cambered final turn remained, albeit slightly reprofiled. This gives the track two distinct halves, the slow and twisty first half, and the fast and open second half. Combine this with the Super GT series, where grids of 40 plus cars are normal, and you end up with a recipe for just about anything and everything. And now we arrive at the main course. What I've done is compiled the wildest moments from each of Super GT's many visits to this track, and separated them into three distinct categories. The first of these I've simply titled Incredible Racing. Every Super GT race at SUGO is packed with side-by-side moments. The nature of the track, together with the two classes of cars, means that this is pretty much unavoidable. However, even within this chaos, there are some moments that stand out from the rest. SUGO has earned an unlikely reputation for three wide overtakes. The first of these was seen in 2001 in the GT300 class, when the Aria Memiya RX-7 absolutely sent it on the Unisia Jex Silvia and 910 Porsche. Unusually, this happened at the corner after the back straight. What would become more obvious in the years after is how the design of the final corner made these three-wide situations a lot more common. The way the corner opens up, along with the incline that prioritizes carrying as much speed as you can, means that drivers behind can get an advantage when it comes to positioning their car. As such, there have been several three-wide moments here over the years, but easily the most iconic would come in 2007, when the Takata Dome NSX, ARTA NSX, and Tom's Lexus would find themselves battling for the lead.
300をかわしながらさあ道上松木を横に入れた脇坂11も粘るさあ道上と脇坂その後ろから伊藤大輔3台並んだ3台並んだそして伊藤と道上脇坂3台どうする脇坂外を抑えるすごい伊藤大輔ここで道上を食った
Absolutely vintage SUGO. But not only is SUGO known for its three wide moments, but also its last lap showdowns. There have been three incredible final lap battles that have taken place here. The first was in 2003, when Juichi Wakisaka in the Esso Ultraflow Supra went up against Eric Comas in the Wood 1 Supra. Once again, I'll just let the footage do the talking.
脇坂テルトゥーノーズインコースを突くかどうだ脇坂当たった脇坂前に出た大逆転か大逆転勝利大逆転だ脇坂取った
Now we skip forward to 2010. This was the first season for Honda's HSV 010 GT, and at SUGO, the Ueda HSV of Takashi Kogure and Keihin HSV of Kudai Sukakoshi put on quite a show.
ついてくるちょっと前に300がいたついたどうだ塚越プッシュ並べるか小舟か塚越か塚越かどっちだ塚越だ大逆転こんなドラマがあるのか
This was Keihin Real Racing's first ever win, and also the closest Super GT finish of all time. And to round us off here is the 2017 race. This boiled down to a battle between Kohei Hirate in the Denso Lexus and Satoshi Motoyama in the S-Road GTR. This one I feel has been unfairly overshadowed by the previous two, but that's not because it's any less dramatic. And that just about does it for Incredible Racing. As I say, every SUGO race is filled with amazing battles, but if I talked about each and every one of them, we would be here until the end of time. So for now, let's move on to our next category, Controversial Accidents. Now, it's one thing to have a crash, and there have been plenty of those at SUGO over the years, but the circumstances around an accident are sometimes more interesting than the accident itself. Case in point, 1997. This year, SUGO held the final round of the season. It all came down to a straight battle between the Castrol Tom Supra of Pedro Della Rosa and Michael Krum, and the Denso Sard Supra of Masami Kageyama. The mixed conditions made for a wild race. Krum had been spun by the Calsonic Nissan early on, but was able to recover. However, later in the race, the two title protagonists would find themselves vying for the same piece of track at the same time. The Castrol Supra was forced into the pits with suspension damage, dropping them out of contention. The Denso Supra, on the other hand, was able to keep going. However, the Castrol car held a 4-point advantage in the standings, meaning that Team Sard had to finish at least 6th to win the title. In the end, they could only manage 7th, ending up tied on points with the Castrol car, who won on countback. Pedro Della Rosa, who took the checkered flag in the repaired car in 15th, very nearly binning it whilst celebrating on the cooldown lap. That 1997 race was certainly not lacking in action. Shortly before the Calsonic GTR spun the Castrol Tom Supra, he had actually done the same thing to the Nismo GTR. The rivalry between Nismo and Impel as Nissan's two top teams has always been quite fierce, with a number of flashpoints over the years. Amazingly, the two cars had collided at almost the exact same place the previous year, with the Nismo car again coming off the worst of the two. Skip forward to 2012, and although a lot had changed since then, the two cars would still manage to come together at SUGO's Turn 1. But let's just say that this time round, they wouldn't keep us waiting. In this case, it was more incidental, with the Calsonic car first touching the Eneos Lexus, which then sent it into the Motul car. Either way, the end result was much worse than the previous two, with both cars retiring pretty much immediately. And in 2015, they would show that there was still no love lost between them. We've looked at a Toyota on Toyota incident, and now Nissan on Nissan, so let's round it off with Honda on Honda. This time, we're at the 2005 race. After the pit stops, the Raybrigg NSX of Sebastian Philippe emerged just ahead of Takashi Kogure's Takata NSX. With Philippe on cold tyres, Kogure knew that it was a perfect opportunity to get in front. However, when he dived down the inside on the entry to the final corner, once again, both of Honda's leading cars were eliminated in one fell swoop. I've also got a bonus entry in this section. In the 2001 season, there were just two McLaren F1 GTRs campaigned in GT500, one by Hitosuyama Racing and the other by Team Take One. At SUGO, they managed to hit each other. It's not really a big deal, but I just thought it was funny. But when it comes to controversial accidents, there is one that stands head and shoulders above the rest. For this, we need to look at the 2013 race. With 11 laps to go, the race was heading for a final crescendo. After some position swapping, the Zent Lexus led, with the Denso Lexus close behind, and a pair of Hondas in hot pursuit. Everything could have changed at any moment. And soon, it did. Okay, let's break down what just happened. Firstly, Yuji Tachikawa in the Zent car goes around the outside of a GT300 McLaren. Wakisaka in the Denso spots his opportunity to make a move by going up the inside of the McLaren instead. However, there simply isn't enough space, and Wakisaka hits the McLaren, who slides into Tachikawa, spinning him into the gravel. Wakisaka, now slowed by this incident, is soon pounced on by the two Hondas waiting in the wings. Fred Makavicki in the Wida HSV goes to the right, and Kogure in the Raybrigg HSV goes to the left. However, neither seem to anticipate the other being there, and they end up inadvertently sandwiching the Denso Lexus. Makaviki spins across the front of the Lexus, T-bones Kogure, and they both spin off the track into retirement. Wakisaka would continue for a couple more laps, but eventually suffered a puncture as a result of the contact. And that is how the top 4 cars all managed to implode in about 15 seconds. Truly one of the SUGO moments of all time. Well, that's controversial accidents dealt with, so what's next? As always, I've saved the best for last. This third category is easily my favourite, and also kind of the reason why I wanted to make this video in the first place. So, let's dive in. In the Japanese racing community, SUGO is not considered as merely any ordinary track. Because of the many bizarre and dramatic things that have happened over the years, this has led to some believing that something more is at play. Something supernatural. In fact, they even have a saying for it: demons live in SUGO. So our final section is dedicated to covering the work of these so-called demons. I've actually mentioned a few already, but this is a collection of the weirdest, near unexplainable things that have ever happened at SUGO in Super GT. Do you remember that dramatic 1997 season finale? That was one of only 2 times that SUGO has ever hosted the final round. The other was the following year in 1998. This season came down to a contest between the Pennzoil Nismo GTR and the Nakajima Racing Mobile 1 NSX. With the NSX starting from 4th and the GTR down in 13th, this represented a golden opportunity for the Nakajima squad. But as the field pulled around the final corner to start the race, the Mobile 1 NSX ground to a halt. With Tom Coronel unable to continue, this led to the surreal moment of the commentators announcing Eric Komas and Masami Kageyama as the GT500 champions before the race had even started. Truly one of the strangest championship deciders ever. As it would turn out, this wouldn't be the final time that SUGO threw up surprises on the pace lap. In 2004, the ARTA NSX came to a stop, but was eventually able to refire and keep going. However, just moments later, the same thing would happen to the number 1 Motul Z, and they weren't as fortunate. Just like in 1998, one of the favourites was out before the green flag. However, unlike 1998, this would be just a minor blip for them, with Nismo going on to seal the title in dominant fashion that year. If you've been on the internet for long enough, then you've probably seen this clip from a V8 Supercars race in 2001.
It's going to miss Ellery. Look at that. How about beautiful timing. Oh, that's going to go straight there. Oh, over the tyres. Oh. You couldn't do it if you tried, could you?
Look at that thing with its cousins.
It's a classic. But at SUGO in 2009, the number 666 VMAC also lost a wheel, and then... the perfect shot. In case you're wondering, the Petronas Lexus was able to keep going and finished 7th in that race. That 2009 race is also memorable for another reason. Although SUGO has caused misfortune for many different teams and drivers over the years, there was always one make who seemed to suffer the most: Nissan. In the 15 races from 1994 to 2008, Nissan failed to win a single one in GT500, and only achieved 2nd on 4 occasions, 3 of those coming in the first 3 seasons before Honda had even joined the party. This led many to believe that Nissan had a SUGO jinx. They simply could not win, whether it be through getting involved in accidents, encountering unfortunate issues, or simply just lacking the pace. However, 2009 would be the breakthrough. The Motul Nismo squad took advantage of changeable conditions and problems for their rivals to score Nissan's first ever GT500 victory at SUGO in their 16th attempt. They had finally broken the curse. Or so they thought. Because the very next year would witness Nissan's most agonizing and weirdest defeat by far. The number 23 Nismo car that won the previous year started from pole, and looked to be cruising to a 2nd consecutive victory as the usual SUGO chaos unfolded behind them. But as the camera tracked the 3rd placed Keihin HSV on lap 72, disaster struck.
のか。
Satoshi Motoyama was able to soon restart the car, eventually coming home in 6th. But what happened? Well, the full story wouldn't become clear until the race was over. As revealed by the onboard camera, as Motoyama was making his way through some GT300 traffic, a chunk of rubber flew up and managed to hit the emergency kill switch on the front of the GTR with enough force to trigger it, thus shutting off the engine immediately. It was an unbelievable, almost incomprehensible level of bad luck. Fortunately, ignoring their 2012 faux pas, SUGO has been kinder to Nissan since then, as they've managed to achieve 5 more wins. That still puts them some way behind both Toyota's and Honda's records at the track, but this actually makes them the most successful of the 3 GT500 makes within the past 15 years. As you would expect, most of the action at SUGO has been on track. However, some of this circuit's strangest and most iconic moments have actually come from the pits. The front straight at SUGO measures just 700 meters, and the pit lane itself only takes up about half of that. As the pit boxes are so tightly packed, it's not uncommon to see cars park at an angle just to fit in. And not only is the pit lane very short, but the pit exit is quite narrow and tricky. When combined with cold tyres, this has resulted in a number of drivers having problems with it over the years. Firstly, in 1996, the number 60 Team Go McLaren of Naoki Hattori managed to loop it around. Luckily, he was able to perform a 5-point turn to get it going, and amazingly, they still went on to win that race. The following year, the Celsonic GTR would have the opposite problem, understeering into the foam barriers on slick tyres, but no real damage was done. In 1999, the Takata Dome NSX would manage the first proper crash in the pit exit, as Juichi Wakasaka lit up the rear tyres immediately after getting off the limiter and oversteered into the outside wall. And it would be the Takata Dome NSX finding trouble again in 2004, this time understeering off but just managing to avoid the wall. And Dome would make it 3 from 3 in 2011. Their Wida HSV would be hit by the Celsonic GTR at turn 2, causing both cars to head into the pits with damage. But when Loic Duval tried to return to the circuits, yeah, if there's one thing we've established, it's that Dome really doesn't have good luck at this track. But of course, a pit lane can be used for a number of things, and one of those is also serving penalties. You might not expect it, but even this has caused issues for some teams and drivers over the years. In 2014, the GT300 Subaru BRZ was given a 10-second stop-and-go penalty, so the driver, Kota Sasaki, came in and stopped at the end of the pit lane. But there was just one problem with this. The penalty box was actually at the start of the pit lane. Eventually, the officials realised what was going on and sent him on his way, before he returned the very next lap, this time thankfully stopping in the right place. But his error would pale in comparison to what would happen in 2021. At the halfway stage, the ARTA NSX was leading GT500 comfortably after starting from pole. However, the team were handed a drive-through penalty for illegal pit work. This being due to how the front left tyre was rested against the car instead of flat on the ground. But just as Nirei Fukuzumi was about to pull in and serve the penalty, the Wedsport Supra caught fire, bringing the safety car out straight away. This of course resulted in the pit lane being closed, but when it did open again on lap 54, ARTA decided to try and serve the drive-through whilst the safety car was still out. They knew that if they did it when the race restarted, they were pretty much screwed anyway with the pack all bunched up, so it was worth a shot. Predictably, this was not allowed, and the team were forced to serve it again. But things got even worse. Fukuzumi had jumped the red light at the end of the pit lane during his first trip through, meaning that another penalty was sure to come. In the confusion of all of this, he ended up trying to serve both penalties on consecutive laps, but by that point, the second penalty hadn't yet been officially issued. So in the end, the car ended up driving through the pit lane 4 separate times, 2 of which to serve penalties, and the other 2 for absolutely no reason. From holding a commanding lead, the ARTA NSX eventually finished 2 laps down, although thanks to attrition, they still managed to grab a single point for 10th place. Amazingly, this wasn't the first time the ARTA squad had lost a win at SUGO thanks to a pit lane-based calamity. In 2002, the ARTA NSX was again leading from pole position when it suddenly entered the pits for an unscheduled stop. The driver had reported a puncture, so the tyres were changed and the car was sent on its way. But as it left the pit box, it became clear that something was wrong. The car still had a puncture, meaning that they had to drive a full lap on a flat tyre before heading back into the pits. What had actually happened is that the driver had misreported the rear right puncture as a front right one. So, not wanting to waste time by doing both axles, the team only changed the front tyres, thus creating this unusual situation. So, who was the driver that made such an amateur mistake? Well, none other than Keiichi Tsuchiya. Yep, the man they call the Drift King, who was one of the most experienced drivers in the series at that time. What's kind of heartbreaking is that after this, he would never get such a good opportunity to win again before retiring at the end of 2003. Okay, now over to 2005. Picture this. A massive fireball erupts just below the Dunlop Bridge. The race is red flagged immediately. It's the number 87 Lamborghini that's crashed, but thankfully the driver's okay. This is already pretty dramatic, but what happens next is what I really want to talk about. In GT300, the Mugen Run M-Tech NSX had started from pole position, but it began to slow, first losing the lead to the number 27 VMAC, and then second to the Ari Amemiya RX-7. Shortly after, the Lamborghini crashes and the race is stopped. As it would turn out, the drop in pace was due to a slow puncture, so the M-Tech driver brings the car into the pits. However, just as he's doing this, race officials are crossing the pit lane to reach the site of the accident. One of them, not seeing the NSX until the last moment, runs into the car, taking its rear wing clean off. The team director of Mugen, Jinichi Kamakura, sees the whole incident and is furious. Backed up by Keiichi Tsuchiya, now acting as an advisor for ARTA, they confront the officials about what happened, but they seem mostly confused. In his anger, Kamakura punches the official returning the rear wing, who wasn't even involved in the incident. Regardless, the red flag lasts 30 minutes, which is more than enough time for Mugen to fix the car, and they would go on to finish second in the race. But Kamakura's actions would not go unpunished. Following a review, the team was stripped of their points for that round, but still made to carry the additional success ballast. Furthermore, the team were also fined 300,000 yen. Because of the physical altercation, Mugen would end up firing Kamakura shortly after, and they would go on to finish second in the final GT300 standings. The 15 points they lost from SUGO would have been enough to give them the title. In a bizarre twist of fate, Kamakura is now the team director of the number 87 Lamborghini, the same car that crashed to cause this situation in the first place. This, for my money, is the strangest thing that's ever happened at SUGO in Super GT, and one that, as far as I'm aware, has not been covered anywhere else on the English-speaking side of the internet. But there is one more case I need to talk about that probably sums up SUGO better than any other. 2015, lap 27. The Denso Lexus is forced onto the grass by the Zent Lexus, spinning across the track and hitting the barriers hard. With the car stranded in the middle of the road, the safety car is called straight away. After the mess is cleaned up, the pit lane finally opens on lap 31. The rules at the time dictated that the mandatory driver change could only be done after 1/3 distance, meaning that, now the safety car was out, it was pretty much the ideal time to stop. And so, they all did. Almost every single driver in the 40-car field made the call to pit at exactly the same time. Now, a few were able to complete their stops and resume with no issues, but this is SUGO.
ドラゴが ARTA の55号車に渋滞ではまってしまって出られない、ケインも出られない、 BRZ も出られない。やっと出た、ここで
大変なことが起こりました。そして
BMAX が止まった。BMAX が止まった。
また中でその間に先に ARTA が出ていく。大渋滞並びにストップ。そして今サーキットも
あっと追突した。
大変なことが起こっています。
55号車が7号車に追突。
これ15号車が違う号車。もうむちゃくちゃなことになっています。
なんで3が止まってるんですか。
エンジンがストップでしょうか。これは
SC のピットロードの出口が赤信号ですね。
ピットロード出口赤。レース再開で。なるほど。レース再開になったために待たなきゃならない。
From the first car entering the pit lane to the last one leaving took close to 3.5 minutes. This is the infamous 2015 SUGO traffic jam. The irony is that SUGO as a venue is notorious for its traffic, with there only being one road in and out. What made this even more humorous for Japanese fans is that in 2015, the race was pushed back from its usual date in July and instead held on Silver Week, a semi-regular Japanese holiday. The joke being that on the holiday, traffic is worse everywhere, somehow even on the racetrack. Unfortunately, this mess would kind of ruin the rest of the race, as the cars were now far more strung out than they were before the safety car. The whole fiasco would result in the rules being changed to prevent something like this from happening ever again. But for those who experienced it at the time, it will certainly live long in the memory. So, in my opinion, SUGO has it all. From intense on-track battles to intense off-track battles, these 2.3 miles have seen pretty much everything. And that brings us neatly to current day, with the most recent running of the race in 2023. It certainly wasn't short on drama. The story of the race was an intense back and forth between the number 8 ARTA NSX and the Astemo NSX, with the latter coming out on top. But it also saw a red flag for Naoki Yamamoto's massive crash in the Stanley NSX that would rule him out for the rest of the season, and a dramatic ending in GT300. A Toyota Supra running out of fuel only to be passed by a Honda NSX on the line. Why does that sound so familiar? But the drama somehow didn't end there. In a truly unprecedented moment, both the GT500 winning Astemo NSX and GT300 winning Up Garage NSX would be disqualified for technical infringements. It's incredible that even now, 30 years on from its first race, the demons of SUGO are still finding new ways to surprise us. I won't lie, I do have a bias towards SUGO, given that 1. Its now usual date of mid-September means that on some years it actually falls on my birthday, and 2. Its 2016 event was the first Super GT race I ever watched in full. And since then, I've been hooked. I hope that through the course of this video, I've been able to show why I love this race so much, because you have truly no idea what you're going to see. But if I'm being honest, with this video, I simply can't express just how engaging this race is to watch. Because viewing these dramatic moments in isolation is one thing, but seeing them play out over the course of a 2-hour race is very much another. In fact, some of the moments I've talked about here have led directly into others. That's just how wild and unpredictable this race can be. But I've got some good news. If you're watching this video on the week it releases, Super GT is heading to SUGO for its usual 300km race this weekend. If what you've seen in this video has piqued your interest, in the description I'll leave a link to where you can join Motorsport.tv, who livestream the races in full with English commentary. There is a subscription fee, but if there's any race on this planet worth paying to see, I'd say it's this one. But either way, I hope you've all enjoyed this journey through one of Motorsport's hidden gems. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.